It was supposed to be just another late night at the office, but it morphed into an even later night at the bar. I'm 4 drinks in by now, exhaustion creeping up fast, practically ready to collapse. Stumbling through the doorway of my apartment, I flop onto the couch, fumbling for my stash of joints. I light one up, the familiar haze settling in as I pull up YouTube on my laptop. I'm halfway through some lavish cruise ship tour video, eyes drooping, when the front door creaks open. I sit up just enough to catch a glimpse. My roommate, Tavern, slipping in. He hangs his jacket in the closet, silent as usual, and shuffles off to his room. Nothing out of the ordinary there. We've been sharing this place for about 3 months, long enough for me to clock his habits. Tavern's the type who doesn't speak unless you prod him first, which suits me fine. He keeps his side tidy, never stirs up trouble. No complaints here. I turn back to my video, sinking deeper into the couch. 5 minutes later, the faint hiss of his shower kicks on. Still nothing weird, just Tavern being Tavern. By now, I'm watching bare-knuckle boxing highlights, eyes barely open, maybe a minute or 2 from passing out completely. Next thing I know, I'm jolting awake in pitch darkness, head pounding, throat dry as hell. I sit up slow, letting the grogginess settle into something I can handle. Grabbing my phone, I check the time, 3:30 a.m. My stomach's growling like crazy, so I drag myself toward the kitchen. That's when I notice it, a soft, constant sound humming in the background. It takes a few seconds to register. The shower's still running. Last night starts replaying in my head. Drinks at the bar, Uber home, crashing on the couch with my laptop, Tavern coming in, the shower starting. I stand there, frozen, trying to piece it together. Maybe he forgot to turn it off before bed? I shake my head. No way, not him. Or maybe he slipped and knocked himself out. The thought hits harder, and suddenly I'm bolting toward his room. The bathroom door's locked. I hammer on it, yelling, "Hey, man, you okay?" Nothing. I think about kicking it down, but hold off, fumbling for my phone to call 911 instead. That's when I see it, an unread text from Tavern. "Hey, couldn't sleep, went to my girlfriend's place. Not sure when I'll be back. Sent 2 hours ago." I stare at the door, then back at my phone. This doesn't add up. First off, Tavern hardly ever texts me, let alone to say he's stepping out. Second, I'd bet my life he's single, has been the whole time I've known him. Third, and most importantly, who the hell is in the shower? I try calling him, no answer. Fire off a few texts, still nothing. I glance at his desk. His keys and wallet are sitting there next to his laptop. My head's spinning now. I bolt back to the living room, flick on every light, and start pacing in circles, trying to connect the dots while that damn shower noise drills into my skull. A sound I never thought could feel so menacing. A few minutes later, I hear a buzz from the kitchen counter. It's Tavern's phone vibrating. Panic sinks its claws in deep. I grab my keys and sprint out of the apartment, tearing down the hall and taking the stairs to the lobby. Even that doesn't feel far enough. I cross the street to the McDonald's, plop down at a table, and sit there, debating whether to call the cops. Something holds me back, nerves, maybe, but the empty restaurant starts closing in on me anyway. I step back out into the quiet streets, and almost instantly, I feel eyes on me. My gaze drifts upward, toward our apartment balcony. There's someone there, a dark figure, standing ramrod straight, stiff like a mannequin, but it's no mannequin. If I squint, I can see it swaying faintly. My blood runs cold. It's not Tavern. It's too tall, way too tall for anyone I know. Its head nearly brushes the underside of the balcony above. I try to make out details, but there's nothing to grab onto. The distance and darkness might explain that, but something tells me it's more than that. Like this thing doesn't have details, just pure, unbroken shadow. Every instinct screams at me to run, but a voice in my head warns that if I do, it'll follow. Instead, I duck back into the McDonald's, lock myself in the bathroom, and finally dial 911. I tell the operator someone broke into my place, that I slipped out before they saw me, but they're still inside. It's the sanest version of the truth I can muster without sounding unhinged. They tell me to hang tight. Cops are on the way. I step out of the bathroom and wait by the exit, eyes locked on the street until red and blue lights pierce the dark. I meet the officers outside, glancing up at the balcony. It's empty now, but the living room door's wide open. They bombard me with questions. Is the intruder armed? Any guess who it is? What do they want? I don't know. I tell them, over and over, until I'm practically shouting for them to go up and see for themselves. The fear in my voice must have clicked, because they finally take it seriously. They tell me to stay by the entrance and head inside, that I'm out there forever, anxiety gnawing at me, wondering what they'll say when they come back. Then, a single, muffled gunshot. My stomach drops. 20 minutes crawl by, no sign of them. More sirens wail in the distance, and soon 4 more cop cars roll up. The scene explodes into chaos. Officers yelling over each other, barking into radios, more questions flying at me that I can't answer. It's all a blur after that. The building gets evacuated, tenants spilling out, dazed and scared, while the cops grow frantic. More gunshots echo, some screams, noises I can't place. My memory blanks out in spots, but I remember being shoved into a police car and driven to the station. They lead me to an interrogation room where 2 plain-suited guys are waiting. No introductions, just straight into questions, each weirder than the last. What company did Tavern work for? What was his job like? How many people have been in the apartment since he moved in? Have I ever heard voices between midnight and 3 a.m. that weren't his? Seen a circle of tall people standing outside during those hours? The creepiest one. Have I ever woken up between midnight and 3 a.m. to find someone at the foot of my bed, only for them to vanish seconds later? If so, what did they look like? Their words dig up stuff I'd brushed off before, stuff I'd chalked up to my imagination, because what else could it be? I had heard voices, always from Tavern's room, late at night when I was half-dead tired. A young woman's voice, or sometimes a guy with a voice so deep it rumbled. Never clear words, just gibberish. And once, stumbling to the bathroom in the dark, I could have sworn I saw someone impossibly tall sitting on the toilet. When I flipped the light on, nothing. I'd blamed it on sleep fog and let it go. Now it's all flooding back that I give them what I can. They scribble notes on their phones, then stand abruptly, say they'll be in touch, and leave. A cop comes in, tells me I can't go back to the apartment. It's a mess they need to get under control. They're putting me up in a hotel nearby, and I should sit tight until they call. What happened up there? I ask. He stares at me, long and hard, like he's wrestling with something ugly. I don't know, he says finally. I really don't know. I nod, force a weak smile that probably looks pathetic, and that's that. It's the next day now, and I'm in the hotel. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. No call from the cop yet. I tried Googling the evacuation, nothing but articles claiming it was a fire. A damn fire, they say. Update. I must have dozed off, because I just woke up. It's 1 a.m., and I can hear the shower running. Lately, I've been waking up bone-tired, even after crashing early. It felt like I hadn't slept in days. Dragging myself out of bed for work was a battle, which was odd because I've always been the high-energy type. A few hours of shut-eye, and I'd bounce back like nothing. But now, I was stumped. I ran through a slew of tests, and even my doctor couldn't pin down what was wrong. The only new thing in my life was Kalis moving in, sharing my bed for the first time. He was my first real love, my first serious shot at this kind of thing. I didn't want to mess it up by banishing him to the spare room. Truth is, I liked having him around. He fussed over me, brought me chamomile tea every night before bed. It was sweet, or so I thought. Then came the pain. One morning, a sharp, throbbing ache shot up my right side, starting at my hip. I leapt out of bed and nearly crumpled to the floor, staggering to the bathroom. "Kalis, can you get in here?" I yelled. When I checked, a massive, dark bruise sprawled across my hip, like someone had whacked me with a metal pipe while I slept. "What's wrong?" Kalis rushed in, but his face looked off. I'd swear he seemed guilty, though he played it cool. Did I fall out of bed or something? I asked. Probably. I don't know, he muttered, brushing it off like it was nothing. That set my mind spinning. This wasn't normal. Kalis, something's wrong with me, I said, voice tight. You should see a doctor then, he replied, cold as ice, before darting out of the bathroom. My regular doctor was still clueless, so he sent me to someone who could rule out anything shady. Kalis drove me to the hospital, still acting dismissive. I'm sure it's nothing. Probably just stress from work, he said. People don't wake up with bruises from stress, I thought, fuming silently. At the hospital, they ran blood tests, stress tests, the works. I should have been relieved when they came back clean, but it just made me feel like I was losing it. Something was off. I'd prescribed sedatives, the doctor said, but your blood work shows you're already on nitrazepam. I blinked, confused. What? I've never taken anything stronger than an aspirin in my life. He double-checked his charts, frowning. No, you definitely tested positive for nitrazepam, a heavy sedative. That night, sitting in bed, my head was a mess. How is that even possible? Kalis walked in with my usual chamomile tea, and as I lifted it to my lips, a chilling thought hit me like a freight train. He was drugging me. Dread flooded my chest, heavier than anything I'd ever felt. I dumped the tea down the bathroom sink and climbed back into bed, heart racing. Was it hot enough for you? Kalis asked, sliding in beside me. Perfect as always, I lied, forcing a smile. Lying there, he felt like a stranger. Had I ever really known him? I was terrified, picturing him doing God knows what while I was out cold. I must have drifted off eventually, because when I woke up, the room was trashed and Kalis was gone. My body ached all over, like I'd been in a brawl. What the hell was he doing to me? I decided then and there to go to the police, but I needed proof, something solid, not just my word against his. So I bought a hidden camera, set it up in the bathroom facing the bed, and waited. The next morning, I woke up exhausted again, which meant he'd done something. But this time, I had it on tape. I opened my laptop, hand shaky, and pulled up the footage. For the first couple of hours, nothing, just me sleeping. For a split second, I hoped I'd imagined it all. Then I saw it, me, jolting upright in bed. What came next felt like a horror movie. I watched myself crawl up the bedroom wall, slow and deliberate, like some possessed thing. I kept going, onto the ceiling, hovering over Kalis, staring down like I was about to pounce. He woke up, and the weirdest part? He didn't flinch. It was like he expected it. He grabbed a stick from under the bed as I lunged. For the next hour, he fought me off, thrashing and wild. Finally, he pinned me down, pulled out handcuffs, and locked me to the bed frame. I glanced at my wrists, red marks, still tender. It made sense now. When Kalis got home from work, I ran to him, throwing my arms around him. Why didn't you tell me what's happening to me every night? He shrugged, casual as ever. I thought you knew. Usually, the drugs I give you make it easier. Why are you even still with me? I pressed, voice cracking. He smirked. My last girlfriend was a jealous nutcase. You're a walk in the park compared to her. I've always tied my birthday to that bleak stretch of the year when cozy autumn fades into early winter rot, a time when vibrant leaves wither into brittle brown husks. People still expect you to celebrate, though, which feels odd if you don't. My fiancée, Lasara, recently asked why I never make a fuss over my birthday, and it's tough to explain. When you've been through something shattering, everything loops back to it somehow. I'd love to tell her, but I'd sound like a lunatic. So I figured I'd start by spilling it anonymously and see where that takes me. It was the year I turned 13. Since You've Been Gone blared on the radio nonstop, and my friends and I were obsessed with quoting How I Met Your Mother. Life was good for a kid. My birthday fell midweek, so the big plans got pushed to the weekend. Still, I couldn't grumble. Cake on a Tuesday sounded decent enough. I got home, had a quiet little celebration with my parents, and opened a few gifts, 2 new PlayStation 2 games. Jackpot. I finished my homework, surfed the web for a bit, and was winding down for bed when a knock rattled the door. We rarely had visitors, so someone showing up at 10 p.m. was strange. By the time I made it halfway down the stairs, my parents had already opened it. A guy in a slick jacket stood there with a clipboard, flanked by 2 armed guards. I caught the tail end of their talk. "We need you to sign the consent form, and we'll get started," the clipboard guy said. "Any questions?" "This can't be legal," my mom shot back. "On what authority, ma'am? This is an emergency. We're authorized to bring anyone in if needed, but trust me, it'll be uglier than doing it here in your own home." As they argued, the guards pushed inside, running through some checklist, asking questions, poking around. Someone mentioned a satellite phone. We didn't have one. From my window, I saw them slap wheel locks on our car and test some electrical gear. My computer's internet dropped. My cell lost all signal. I didn't check the landline, but I'd bet they cut that too. They were boxing us in, locking us down. No clue who they were, no badges, no logos, just stern guys in windbreakers with guns on their hips. One of them came into my room while my parents fretted downstairs. They'd been told to wait outside. This guy was huge, 6 feet 4 inches, maybe, looking like he could snap me in half with his bare hands. Without a word, he started rifling through my stuff. "Got any walkie-talkies?" he asked. "Radio projects? Science kits? Anything like that?" "Nope," I said, shaking my head. "I've got a PlayStation 2. That can go online, right?" Before I could answer, my mom chimed in, "We don't let him play online. It can't do that." Just to be sure, he yanked the power cable and tossed it into a sealed bag with some random trinkets and keys they'd nabbed. No chances taken. Yes, I wasn't playing my new games anytime soon. When they finished tearing the place apart, they called us downstairs. The clipboard guy cleared his throat, and the room went dead quiet. Even my dad, who's usually a force, stayed silent. That's how you knew it was bad. For 72 hours, this neighborhood and the surrounding areas are under lockdown, the guy said. A geological event caused some unexplained issues. You've probably noticed oddities lately: milk souring fast, houseplants turning weird colors, frogs clogging the streets. My parents nodded, saying nothing. Maybe they'd seen it. I hadn't. He tucked his clipboard under his arm. "You've been exposed to a chemical. It reacts badly to hormones tied to deep REM sleep. For your safety, we're enforcing a temporary 72-hour sleep ban." "Excuse me." My dad stepped forward, but a guard matched him, and they both froze before it escalated. "Exposure was about 9 hours ago," the guy went on. "That leaves you roughly 63 hours, until 1 p.m. Friday. It's not negotiable. This is for your security." They handed us each a plain red folder, 3 pages inside. One saying they could force us if we resisted, another claiming we'd already signed consent, and a third with a sleep schedule and an inventory of confiscated stuff to be returned later. They left a box of 50 glass vials, 4-hour booster shots, they called them. Kids couldn't take more than one every few hours, and pregnant women couldn't touch them. Lucky for us, Mom wasn't pregnant. I'm an only child. They also gave us fiber bars, unbranded and warm, with some hormone supplement. The clipboard guy tried explaining, and my parents hung on every word, but I barely followed. I kept eyeing the guards. They looked wiped out, like they weren't sleeping either. One's mouth hung open, drooling a little, blinking one eye at a time. I swear he nodded off for a second before stepping outside. "I don't know if we can do this," my mom said, voice shaky. "If you can't, call this number," the guy replied, pointing to the folder's last line. "It's the only one that works. If someone falls asleep and can't wake up within minutes, they're in serious danger. Keep them alert however you can until we get here to take them to our site. They'll be chemically forced to wake there." "What happens if they don't make it?" Mom asked. He tapped his pen on the clipboard and shook his head. "They'll probably die. Others might too." They went to the kitchen with my parents for more details. One guard, the gruff one, came back with my PlayStation cable, handing it over with a pat on the shoulder. "Checked with the tech team. You're good to go." "Oh, and happy birthday." I'd almost forgotten it was my birthday. I wanted to smile but couldn't. Too many questions swirling, too much fear to voice them. They left after another 20 minutes, and there we were, alone in the kitchen. Mom smoked under the fan, something she'd only done twice before, when she lost her job and when Dad got sick. Her hand shook, ash dropping onto the stove. Dad sat with his arms crossed, staring at the booster shots. "This is no joke," he said. "We've got to help each other through it," Mom added, trembling. She'd been crying. "We can't be alone," Dad said. "We'll keep busy. You can play your games as much as you want, but no sleeping." "They gave me the cable back," I said. "So it's okay to use the PlayStation?" "It's okay, honey," Mom coughed. "Play your games." At first, I didn't get the big deal. No school, no bedtime, endless screen time. Sounded like a win. I stayed up gaming, Ratchet, and Clank, having a blast. I grabbed snacks and tried a fiber bar. It tasted like twigs and raisins but calmed my head, not sleepy, just focused. My eyelids itched, resisting closing. The house stayed lit up all night, music blaring downstairs. My parents kept checking in, trying to keep me engaged, though I think it was more for them than me. By 5 a.m., Dad took his first booster shot. I heard him cursing from upstairs. Apparently, it tasted like stale rice and death. Mom took hers half an hour later, mixing it with orange juice to choke it down. By 7 a.m., even I felt it. I'd never pulled an all-nighter on a school day like that. Sure, I'd done it with friends, but we'd planned for it. Now, I was nodding off. My parents stepped in with a family breakfast, acting like we'd slept. "You're always grumpy in the morning," Mom said. "Pretend it's just that." I knew they'd slipped a booster into my cereal, 3 empty vials on the counter, and they hadn't doubled up yet. I ate it anyway. We weren't even halfway through this mess. After breakfast, I was brushing my teeth upstairs when I heard commotion outside. Peering through the hall window, I saw our neighbor, Gavin Peterson, a 55-year-old fishing supply clerk, crawling out his front door, puking black and blue gunk onto the pavement. I'd never seen him do more than wrestle a lawnmower, and now he was on all fours like his life depended on it. His wife screamed from inside, "Gavin, wake up." He staggered up, leapt into his truck bed with freakish agility, grabbed a wrench, and yanked her by the hair when she ran out. A hand covered my eyes, Dad pulling me away. I heard her scream turn to a gurgle, then Gavin's familiar chuckle, the one he'd let out at Dad's bad punts. My mind filled in the rest, and it wasn't pretty. Dad spun me around, his face lined with exhaustion. "Stay with me and Mommy," he said, shaking me as I yawned. "We'll be fine. Don't look outside. People are sick." "Are we sick?" I asked. "We'll be okay," he said. "Just a matter of time. But I don't want you seeing people get hurt." Gavin's not himself. Then came pounding on our door, Gavin, laughing, banging with his wrench. He circled the house, rattling windows, until a car rolled up. A pop, not a gunshot, maybe a taser, and he was dragged off. Mom came upstairs, plastering on a smile, asking me to show her my game progress. She was distracting me, and I let her. I didn't want to picture Gavin out there, shirt stained with that goo, wrench in hand. We spent hours gaming and planning a DVD schedule. Mom nixed a walk idea, something outside Gavin's place she didn't want me to see. Blood, maybe. I didn't ask. My parents tried keeping spirits up, but it was wearing them down. Dad stood by the door, zoned out. Mom counted minutes to her next booster, hating the taste. I wasn't eager either. They made my stomach churn. By noon, Dad was splashing cold water on his face, doing chores to stay busy. Sirens wailed faintly, and someone hosed down our front door, probably washing off Gavin's mess. Dogs patrolled the streets, and a phone call checked if we were awake. By dinner, Mom was a wreck, shaking, gagging at smells. Dad rubbed his eyes, pacing. We tried board games, but Mom couldn't hold it together, drooling and making weird noises. She bolted to the bathroom, locking herself in. Dad begged her to open the door, but she went quiet. He smashed the handle with a hammer. Too late. She was asleep, slumped on the toilet, black and blue fingertips poking from her mouth. Dad rinsed her face, yelling at me to wait elsewhere. I sat, heart racing, wondering if she'd turn like Gavin. When they came back, they sat me down, insisting we'd make it, halfway done, homestretch. They were gentle, but I was lost, fixating on a faint noise outside. Then a click. I shut my eyes, and a loud bang followed. Someone was shooting at us. We hit the floor as bullets lodged in the door and cracked the kitchen window. Hysterical laughter echoed outside, voices garbled. 2 more shots, one sparked out the kitchen light. They ran off, cackling. "We can't stay here," Mom whispered. "You want to go where they took Gavin?" Dad hissed. "A hospital full of them?" She fell silent, glancing at me. They argued in private, sending me upstairs, away from windows, no sitting. I peeked anyway. Down the street, a stalled car's headlights glowed. 6 people surrounded it, 2 in guard uniforms, smashing the windows. They pulled an old man out, pinning him, covering his face except his nose, forcing him to sleep. Minutes later, he heaved up black and blue goo, then joined them, walking off, some jogging, one crawling with something dangling from his mouth. More gunfire rang out elsewhere. My parents decided we'd hunker down, locked doors, closed curtains, low noise. What choice did I have? That night, things unraveled. Dad nearly double-dosed his boosters. Mom stopped him. Phone check stopped. Mom tried calling, but the line was dead. Gunfire grew frequent. Cars honked. No sirens. Fires bloomed downtown, smokestacks rising. Mom couldn't eat, barely stood, muttering to herself. Dad's cold splashes didn't help. I wasn't great either, shaky hands, headaches, electric jolts down my neck. I kept seeing things in the corner of my eye, screams by the windows that weren't there. Morning brought new problems, no power, no water. We needed the lake nearby. Mom volunteered, but she could hardly move. Dad went instead. We watched from upstairs. The sun cast long, sickly shadows. "Isn't it your birthday soon?" Mom mumbled, dazed. "That was Tuesday," I said. "Did you wish to get older?" she asked, laughing wildly, eyes sunken and twitching. She wasn't all there. An hour later, Dad returned, empty-handed, with 24 people trailing him. Mom nodded blankly, nearly dozing, something moving in her throat. I shook her. She snapped awake, saw them, and shoved me into the closet with the last boosters, a watch, and fiber bars. "Someone will get you," she said. "Stay awake. I'll figure something out." She locked me in before I could argue. Downstairs, I heard the key turn, Dad letting them in. Furniture flipped, voices yelled nonsense, a fight broke out. Something smashed, someone kicked the tub, screams muffled like the old man's. Hours passed in the dark. I couldn't tell if my eyes were open. Time warped. The watch barely helped. Voices whispered, some begging for game cheats. I felt myself slipping, something stirring inside like a hand in a glove. I burst out, dragging the boosters, desperate for light. The house was trashed, furniture broken, lights smashed, blood on the walls, door hanging loose. A stench hit me from the kitchen. A body, a young guy with a knife in his chest, jaw twisted, a black and blue arm reaching from his throat. I shoved down a fiber bar to steady myself. Outside, I didn't know where to go, find my parents or flee. My sleep-starved brain couldn't decide. I wandered, hallucinating faces in trees, a man dragged by an arm from his mouth, another slapping the lake like a kid. Downtown, 24 people swayed outside a burning building, black and blue arms wafting the flames like kelp. Voices called, "Come closer, you belong here," from outside and within me. I turned away, but they screeched louder, hands reaching, gunfire and glass crunching underfoot. I collapsed, concrete cold against my cheek, legs useless. Yes, they laughed, burn with us. Then nothing. I woke to a man running toward me, a car's headlights warm. Frogs watched from afar, a blue sunflower staring back. The exposure hit 6 hours earlier than they'd said. I'd outlasted it. Barely. They found me unconscious 9 miles from home. I'd slept, but the effect skipped me compared to most. The news called it riots, a low-income screw-up, barely a blip nationally. Gavin was never right after, brain damage or trauma, who knows. Mom got narcolepsy, Dad lost taste and smell. They recall it like a nightmare they woke from in a hospital. I still see those hands swaying by the fire, real or not. It haunts me. Sometimes I feel it's still in me, waiting to take over, one night away. I still remember the first time I heard it. Click, click. Honey, what's that? I asked my wife, Leora, after waking up in the middle of the night to that strange sound. What's what? She mumbled, groggy and annoyed that I'd disturbed her so late. But just like that, the sound stopped. The next night, it came again, click, click. What could it possibly be? I wondered as I nudged Leora awake once more. This time, she heard it too. It sounds like the doorknob, she said. But by the time we got out of bed and walked over, the noise had vanished. Fortunately, back when I lived in the city, I'd gotten into the habit of locking my bedroom door, a habit that stuck with me when I moved into Leora's apartment and even now, in our suburban home. The following night, we didn't hear it. Maybe we were both too deep in sleep, or maybe it didn't happen at all. Either way, we figured the weirdness was over. But then, the night after that, it returned. Click, click. Is that what I think it is? Leora asked, her voice tinged with unease. Most certainly, I replied, a chill creeping down my spine. The recurring sound was starting to genuinely scare me. This time, I tiptoed to the door, careful not to make a sound that might alert whoever, or whatever, was behind it. I flung it open quickly, only to find my 8-year-old daughter, Saria, standing there, staring at me. Saria? I said, startled. Yes, Dad, she replied calmly. What are you doing, dear? She nearly scared me half to death. I missed you and Mommy, she said. It was so sweet that I almost forgot how eerie the noises from the previous nights had been. That's all, I asked, but she just turned and walked away. Good night, Daddy, she called softly. I climbed back into bed and let out a sigh of relief, comforted that it was just my daughter behind the sound. But the next day, I started thinking about it more, about how many times it had happened and how, after saying she missed us, she'd simply walked off. So, when it happened again the next night, I didn't open the door. Instead, I crept over quietly and listened. Click, click. I could hear Saria tugging at the doorknob, twisting and turning it in a clear attempt to get in while we slept, or at least, while she thought we were sleeping. That's when it really started to terrify me. If she was trying to open the door and sneak into our bedroom in the dead of night, what did she plan to do? The thought consumed me. I couldn't fall back asleep that night and decided I had to figure out what was going on. So, the next night, I did what any sensible parent would do when their kid kept mysteriously fiddling with the bedroom door. I left it unlocked. Pretending to sleep, I lay in bed, passing the time on my phone to stay awake. Hours later, in the middle of the night, I heard a new sound. Not the usual twisting and turning of the knob, but the simple, deliberate turn of the handle, followed by the squeaky door creaking open. Click, screech. I quickly turned off my phone and squinted my eyes just enough to peek through them, feigning sleep. What happened next still haunts me. In the dim light, I saw the blurry shape of Saria open the door, close it behind her, and slowly walk over to Leora's side of the bed. She must miss her mom after all, I thought, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. But then I carefully tilted my head, just slow enough so she wouldn't notice, and saw my 8-year-old daughter reach behind her back, pull a kitchen knife from her pajamas, and raise it above her head. She swung it down toward my sleeping wife, but not before I lunged forward and caught the blade in my hand, letting out a loud scream. Saria, what the hell are you doing? She didn't answer. She just hissed, a loud, guttural sound, and slithered out of the room, darting through the hallway and back to her own bedroom. We heard her door slam shut. We locked Saria in her room that night before Leora drove me to the hospital. As I explained what had happened, my bleeding, impaled hand was more than enough proof to convince her. I'd love to say that when we got back, Saria returned to normal, the doorknob noises stopped, and we went back to being a happy family, living our lives like nothing ever happened. But when we returned home early that morning, Saria had broken through her bedroom door and vanished from the house, never to be seen again. To this day, I still wonder where she might be. I keep locking my door every night, and I can only hope others do the same. I moved in with my girlfriend recently, and I don't feel safe anymore. I met my girlfriend, Isolde, 7 months ago at a bar. We clicked instantly and started dating just 3 days later. She brought nothing but joy, practically the textbook definition of a soulmate. So, when I graduated from university, we both agreed it made sense to move in together. She's 2 years older than me and was already working, so I moved into her house. But after settling in, everything went downhill. The first incident happened on the very first night. Isolde works the night shift, so she was getting ready to leave. "Babe, I'm off to work now," she said sweetly. "Just a heads up again, the neighbors next door can get a little cranky at night, so just ignore them." Yeah, I get it," I replied, brushing it off. I gave her a kiss goodbye, and she left, leaving me alone in her house. I sat down at the kitchen table and got to work. For context, I work remotely as a character designer for a video game company. It was peaceful for a few hours, until the clock hit 2 a.m. That's when the cranky neighbors started screaming their heads off. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded like a heated argument. I tried to ignore it for a while, but eventually the noise became unbearable. Then came the banging on the walls, the sound of glass shattering on the roof, followed by more shouting and arguing, so much that it felt like multiple voices overlapping each other. I tried blasting music through my headphones, but even that didn't help. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, so I called it a night and stopped working. The next day passed in a blur. I chose not to tell Isolde about the neighbors since it was apparently normal. I didn't want her to think it bothered me that much. It was her house, after all. Nighttime rolled around again, and I was watching TV on the sofa when the arguments from the neighbors kicked off once more. Thumping, glass shattering, furniture being tossed around. You'd think their place was a damn wrestling ring. Jesus Christ, I muttered to myself. Suddenly, I heard banging on the door, followed by a blood-curdling scream. "What the hell?" I said, pausing the movie I was watching. The neighbor was trying to break into the house. That was it. That was the last straw. I got up and headed to the back door where the banging and screaming were coming from. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen table, just in case the guy managed to break through. Thank God the door was locked. I leaned against it, each punch jarring my back. My heart was racing. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. For all I knew, this guy could seriously hurt me. It felt like forever before the banging stopped, assuming it was a man. Anyway, the screaming died down too, and everything went silent. What the hell? I muttered under my breath. There was no way I could live like this, and I decided I'd confront Isolde about it when she got home. With that in mind, I double-checked that all the doors were locked, shut the windows tight, and went to bed. A few hours later, at 6 a.m., Isolde got home and slipped into bed beside me. She hugged me from behind and kissed the back of my neck, waking me up. "How's everything?" she asked softly. "Were the neighbors loud?" I grunted and turned to face her, rubbing my eyes. "What?" she giggled. "How'd it go with the neighbors?" I found it odd that she asked today, but not yesterday. Maybe I was just tired. "The husband tried breaking in," I said. "He banged on the door for at least 2 minutes, screaming. I thought I was done for. Seriously. Isolde, I don't think this house is safe for us to live in. As long as the door's locked, you'll be fine," she said with a sweet smile. I gave her a serious look. "Listen, I can't live like this," I said, trying to keep my tone gentle. "I didn't even feel safe here last night. You're telling me this is going to happen every single night?" Isolde looked down, her eyelids drooping in discomfort. I felt bad blaming her for something she couldn't control, but we clearly had to do something about it. "I can't live in fear every night," I added. "I'll call the wife tonight and see if anything can be done," she said, hugging me tightly. Okay. I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Thank you, baby. I know it's not your fault, but it's impossible to feel safe in your own house like this." The following evening, Isolde left for her night shift again, leaving me alone in the house. About 15 minutes later, she texted me, saying the problem was solved and things should be better tonight. I thanked her and sprawled out on the sofa to unwind. I ended up dozing off while watching a movie. A few hours later, at 4 a.m., I woke up to screaming from the psychotic neighbor again. Furious, I got out of bed, ready to finally get to the bottom of this. But as I walked closer to the door, something felt off. I noticed the voices and banging were louder than usual, closer, like they were coming from inside the house. It was the first time I'd really paid attention to where the sound was coming from, and it caught me off guard. Subtle, but unexpected. Following the trail of the noise, the screams didn't lead me to the front entrance or the house next door. They led me to the basement door, the only part of the house I hadn't explored yet. My heart started racing. This has to be my imagination, I thought. The sounds can't be coming from my girlfriend's basement, right? With my legs trembling, I tried pushing the basement door open, but it was locked. That only made the screams downstairs louder. They sounded like cries for help. What the hell is down there? I muttered. The thought alone sent shivers down my spine. Thankfully, or maybe not, my uncle had taught me how to pick locks when I was younger, just in case I ever needed it in a pinch. Thanks, Uncle Will. If there was ever a time to use that skill, it was now. I grabbed 2 paper clips and started fiddling with the lock. In just a few minutes, it clicked open, but the door still wouldn't budge. I scoured the house for something to pry it with and found a crowbar. Using all my strength, I forced the door open. Looking back, I wish I hadn't. The instant it swung wide, loud, blood-curdling screams pierced my ears, screams you'd only hear in a horror movie. Covering my ears, I pushed my way downstairs. What I saw was beyond horrific. Dead bodies of dozens of guys were lined up across the basement floor. Worst of all, every one of them looked around my age, many resembling the exes Isolde had mentioned in passing. Above them hung a jar, and inside it were what looked like their faces, glowing with an eerie light. They were screaming in absolute, agonizing pain. From what I could tell, those were their souls, trapped, sealed souls of innocent men, suffering endlessly in some kind of afterlife torment. The stench was unbearable. The bodies were drained dry, as if everything inside them had been sucked out, leaving only their hollow skin. Despite that, their faces were still somewhat recognizable. Each body was neatly arranged to preserve its original shape, with their names written in blood in front of them. Jorin, Nivak, Michael, and so on. Up close, their screams sounded more like desperate gasps. The room was so loud it made me dizzy. The noise felt like it was clawing into my brain. My mind went blank, my body trembling at the realization that this was my girlfriend's doing. It got worse when I reached the end of the line. There was another name written in blood, but no body behind it, as if the space was still waiting. Kale. That was my name. Then I got a notification on my phone, a message from Isolde. My heart stopped as I read it. Hey babe, on my way home. Sorry about yesterday. Let's have some fun tonight. I listen to true crime podcasts every night on my walk home from work. Even though my favorite podcast had already released its episode for the week, the app showed a new one available. Excited, I hit play. It was a small town, the kind with mom and pop shops lining the streets, the kind where everyone knows your name. But little did the residents know, they'd soon be rocked by a horrible crime. I stopped at a traffic light, the red glow reflecting off the wet pavement. A black SUV sped by across from me. Eerie blue refrigerator lights shone from inside a corner deli, its chairs stacked upside down on the tables. The signal turned to walk. That chilly September evening was no different for the young student. She left her shift at the local store and walked back home, except she never made it. Young student, local store, damn, this was hitting close to home. I was a part-time student at Franklin Community College and worked at the local convenience store. And, of course, I was walking home right now. I glanced behind me at the alleyway behind Alessandro's Pizza, dark except for the neon light spilling from the sign. Her boyfriend reported her missing the next day. The town conducted a volunteer search, and after 2 days, they found something. Dread twisted in my stomach, expecting a body, but what came next was so much worse. Washed up on the shore of Warrington Lake, they found a pair of size 9 red Converse sneakers. I stopped dead and looked down at my own red Converse sneakers, damp from the rain. What the hell? My heart started pounding. The shoes were sent to forensic analysis, who would compare their wear patterns to another pair of her shoes to determine if they belonged to the victim. A rumbling sound made me jump. I turned to see a dark SUV turning left at the intersection. Hadn't I seen that car a few minutes ago? Maybe it was following me. But it passed and disappeared into the darkness. Come on, Lyrian, get a grip, I told myself. Converse are popular sneakers, a little out of fashion, sure, but size 9 is common for women, and what college student doesn't have some kind of job? What? You think you're listening to a prophecy of your own death? Yeah, right? After a few weeks, the results came back. The analyst was certain the shoes belonged to none other than Lyrian Vera. The blood drained from my face. Lyrian Vera, that's my name. What the hell? How? I didn't have time to think. I forced myself to move, breaking into a run. The small shops blurred past me in a colorful streak. Searching the lake came up empty. Without a body, a crime is hard to solve, but the police didn't give up. Finally, a witness came forward. Someone had seen a car parked at the lake that night. Around 2 a.m., a black SUV with darkened windows. No, what the hell was going on? I whipped around. The street was empty. No people, no cars, no witnesses, said the little voice in my head, the one that's watched too many crime shows. My eyes scanned the shops, all closed. There were 6 black SUVs matching the witness's description in the Franklin area, but one of them caught Detective Nolan's eye. It belonged to Joran Kale, a registered sex offender. Virum. The sound was so faint I almost missed it over the podcast voice. I spun around, and there it was, 2 blaring white headlights behind me, coming from a black SUV. I pushed my legs to pump faster. The car didn't speed up. It crawled along slowly, taking its time, like the driver knew he could catch me no matter what. I glanced back, trying to make out the figure behind the darkened windshield, but the headlights were too bright to see anything. Joran wasn't just a registered sex offender. He'd been convicted of assaulting a woman he worked with who had multiple piercings and short dark hair, just like Lyrian. The car stalked me down the road like a lion tracking its prey. I veered left onto a dark residential street, just a few more steps. Headlights flashed across me, casting my running shadow onto the pavement. I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as I could. The little brown house with the yellow shutters came into view. I sprinted across the grass, fumbling for my keys. Click. I threw the door open, slammed it shut behind me, and turned the deadbolt. Collapsing against the door, I started crying. I heard the rush of the car passing the house, continuing down the road, but I wasn't safe. Torin wasn't home yet. I was alone in a dark house with someone out there who knew exactly where I lived. Still sobbing, I checked all the locks, then called Torin. He assured me he was 5 minutes away. I made my way down the dark hallway and into the bathroom, setting my phone on the counter. I grabbed a clump of tissues and started blowing my nose. Click. I jumped and whipped around, but the sound wasn't from outside the door. My phone screen lit up. The podcast was still playing. I must have bumped it when I set it down. It had skipped several minutes ahead according to the play indicator. What do you think happened to Lyrian? The baritone voice asked. I reached to turn it off. Well, she told me she wanted to run away before I stopped dead. It was Torin's voice, clear as day, coming through the speakers. She did? Why? The host asked. She wasn't happy with her grades, her job, her parents. She told me sometimes she'd dream of just moving to some random state and leaving it all behind. I froze, staring at the mirror. I never said that, never. Torin was lying. I mean, that was hurtful to me as her boyfriend, you know? I thought we were going to get married someday, but apparently she didn't feel the same way. My heart pounded in my ears. So you think she just skipped town and is happily living her life out somewhere else, rather than being abducted or murdered? A pause. Yes, that's exactly what I think. That's all for now. Thank you to our listeners. The outro played. I stared at my reflection, everything crashing down at once. My mind racing to catch up. The front door creaked open. Footsteps echoed outside. Lyrian, I'm back. I backed away from the door. Lyrian. My eyes darted to the window. I ran over, turned the lock, pushed it open, popped the screen out, and swung a leg over. Pulling myself through, I hit the ground and ran as fast as I could.